This is a short review to help you with the most difficult topics on Quiz 1 coming up. I wanted to give you a guide that was detailed enough because this is your first quiz with me, and sometimes before you take your first quiz, there can be some anxiety just because you don't know fully what to expect. I want you to be able to have that anxiety eased by me showing you the main topics and kind of how the questions are going to be ordered. So let's first just talk about the order of the questions or how the questions are going to look. There's going to be 9 multiple choice questions, each of which are going to have a passage that goes along with them. And then there will be one short answer question. We'll talk about these things in just a second. Let's talk first, though, about the big topics. These 5 topics are what most of your questions are going to be on. I had you do your Quiz 1 review. Your Quiz 1 review went over a lot of different information. Now what I would have you do is focus on the information that pertains to these topics the most when studying for your first quiz. So the first thing is maize. Basically, you need to understand what maize did in Native American societies. If you understand what maize did in Native American societies, then you should have a good understanding of what this question about maize is going to be asking you. Second thing is you need to know the difference in the colonies when it comes to demographics. What did the populations of the New England colonies look like? They were mainly families. What did the colonies, the southern colonies demographics look like? They were mainly single men. Which colonies were the richest? Which colonies were the poorest? Which colonies looked the most like European countries? Which colonies looked disorganized and a mess? All of those things are going to be on your quiz, so you need to have a good understanding of what the demographics of the colonies are. Next is the African slave trade. You're going to want to know where African slaves went. What colonies did they go to the most? Which colonies did they go to the least? Why was there a difference? Why did some colonies get a lot of African slaves and why did some not get very many at all? Was that because of religious reasons? Was that because of economic reasons? Was that because of the environment? You need to understand those things. Additionally, you're going to want to know what caused for the African slave trade to start to take place in North American colonies. If you remember, indentured servants were the major reason of labor, or the major source of labor until 1676, and then an event happened. That event would be Bacon's Rebellion. And when that rebellion took place, all of a sudden they switched to African slavery. Knowing that Bacon's Rebellion is kind of the cause of that increase in African slavery is a big deal, and then also maybe be able to explain why Bacon's Rebellion caused for that to happen. Next, you're going to want to know government structures. You're going to want to know the documents that created the first government structures, such as the Mayflower Compact. What was the Mayflower Compact and which colonies did the Mayflower Compact cover? Didn't cover all the colonies, it just covered a certain one. You also want to know about the House of Burgess. What was the House of Burgess? What did it do? What colony was it the government for? And then the final thing, and I would say this is maybe the biggest question on your quiz, is what environmental impact was had on the colonies and Native Americans? If it was hot, how did that change what European colonies looked like? Or how did that change what Native American colonies looked like? Or Native American societies looked like? What structures were built by Native Americans to deal with that hot weather? What structures were built by permanent Native American colonies, if they had permanent hunting grounds or if they were able to cultivate maize? What did those structures look like compared to, let's say, the Great Plains, which were more nomadic? If it was cold in European colonies, how did that change what their money systems looked like, their economics of the colony looked like? You want to know different examples of the environmental impact on the colonies. Now, I told you that 9 questions are going to be multiple choice, but you're going to have a passage, and the passage is going to look something like this. This is actually a passage that's on your quiz, but the thing is you're not going to be able to probably read through all this in incredible detail. This is a timed quiz, so because of that, you need to have a method or a pattern that you're going to go through, and I want to go through that pattern with you. We've maybe talked about this a little bit in class, but this is a time to really set up a plan for when you get your quiz how you tackle these questions. So the first thing you always want to do is read the question. You want to know what you're looking for in the passage. And then you're going to start to look in different areas for if the information can be found doing these 3 steps. So the first step is going to be you need to read the source. You're going to be surprised at how many of the questions, the multiple choice questions that are being asked, are do you just know the topic of the source? Now, for this one, it could be the author. We don't know who this author is. They're just a historian of some type that is not notable to us. And then it says the Atlantic and world history. That's pretty vague. So because of that, probably most questions aren't going to be able to be answered by just reading this source. So then what you want to do is you want to scan through this and try to get the main idea. Okay, well, what is this talking about? And as I scan through this, I see that this is talking about Christopher Columbus, the Aztecs coming to America. There was a big city, the Aztec Empire. So I see that this is talking about Native Americans, probably pre-Christopher Columbus, and cities that were built by them. Now that I know that, I might be able to answer the question, but maybe I still can't. So the third thing you have to do is, okay, is there specific content that this question is looking for? Maybe they're specifically looking for understanding what the Mississippian culture looked like in the East, or they want to know more about the Aztec Empire culture. And so because of that, then you'll have to search for that specific context the question is looking for. But most of the time, the source or the main idea of the passage is going to be enough to answer the question. More or less what this passage is doing is it's pointing you in the direction of the specific information that the question is asking. Let's do one more. So first thing we would do is read the source. This time the source would be helpful. We see that it's a Virginia governor, Alexander Spotswood. Now we don't know Alexander Spotswood, but we see that he's addressing the members of the House of Burgess. So we know that this is going to be a governmental address of some type regarding the House of Burgess, which is in Jamestown, a southern colony. So just by reading this, the question may just be trying to ask you, do you know where the House of Burgess is? And you being able to pick out, so the question might actually say something more like, which colonial region would this be most meaningful for? And what that's really asking you to do is, do you know where the House of Burgess is? And you would be able to figure that out through the source. Second thing we would do though is figure out the main idea. As I read through this or scan through this, I see that this is about security of the frontier against Native American Indians. Then finally, there might have to be specific content that you're looking for from the question. So maybe they're wondering, okay, well, how are you securing the frontiers? And you see that they had these parties of rangers at first, and now it looks like they're using Native American allies to be able to protect the frontier. So they're shifting from using their own rangers to Native American allies. That's specific. But again, you want to go through these 3 things. First, read the source, see if that answers the question. Then second, can the main idea help you answer the question? And then finally, specific content. Hope this is helpful for you. Happy studying and good luck on your first quiz.